Okay, so thank you all for joining us tonight over Zoom, and those of you tuning in on YouTube, anyone watching the recording after the fact. I'm so excited, and I'm sure our panelists are also very excited for this special collaboration, which is going to be our kickoff event, showcasing all of our 6 different community builders and leaders who are going to share more about all of our non-traditional career paths and the impact of our own life experiences, identities, and mental health journeys that has gotten all of us to where we are today. And that's also known as intersectionality. We invite you all to ask questions and engage with us in both of the chats, as we may address them during our conversation or we'll save them for a Q&A at the end. So feel free to save those questions or you can add them in. And again, just in case you're tuning in from YouTube, there's a little bit of a delay. So if you do have any comments or anything, we might see them about 20 seconds after the fact if there's a bit of a delay. So tonight's event is sponsored by Symphonic Alignment. We have Anise Health, Asian Connections Hub, as well as some of us who are community building, and as well as supported by Keep It Saucy and the Sunnyside app. So all attendees are going to receive a digital resource handout that also has all of our speaker bios and more information on all of our sponsors of tonight. So before we get into the introductions, I'd just like to offer a few suggestions and gentle reminders in respect to tonight's speakers and to help you get the most out of tonight's event. So we do kindly ask that you remain muted, though utilizing the chat and engaging with us is encouraged. I'll do my best to watch the chat so our panelists can focus when they're speaking. Please come with an open mind. Our panelists are here to share their experiences, which is a very vulnerable thing to do. So thank you all so much. And please be respectful and ask questions thoughtfully and with curiosity rather than with judgment. Do your best to use I statements rather than speaking for others, and all experiences are valid. And just a brief reminder to the panelists, I don't think we'll run into this issue, but if you do feel like you might talk about topics that might be a little more sensitive in nature, please try to remember to do some type of content warning or something for our guests tuning in just in case. Yeah, so I'm excited to get ready with some of our brief introductions. And I'm actually going to, I guess I'll start with myself since I've been talking all this way so I can let the rest of you kind of speak after. So we are going to say a little bit about who we are, pronouns, the organizations that we're representing tonight, why the topic is important to us personally, and what we're hoping the audience gains from these conversations or your story in particular. And those of you who are tuning in from Zoom or YouTube, feel free to also let us know maybe where you're tuning in from or how this topic interests you or excites you, and maybe what you're looking to get out of tonight as well. So yeah, so my name is Sam. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm representing Symphonic Alignment as well as Keep It Saucy. This topic is important to me because I feel like it's just impacted me so much within my lifetime and through my vast experiences. I feel like I have a lot of stories to share about my journey. And so I love to see how I can help others who might be on a similar journey feel less alone on that, and also get some representation because sometimes we're just lacking a little bit of representation. And I'm really hoping that the audience and all of you tuning in can really feel a sense of clarity and like understanding a little bit more about yourself and your journey. So, Supreme, would you like to go?
Hi, my name is Supreme, and I have been into community development and general representation for everybody who is a part of an underrepresented or underserved demographic, especially. Um, when when I was growing up, I didn't realize that there were so many resources that were outside of like the purview of say my family or anything. So I started to volunteer for a lot of organizations in high school and in college to give back to communities as a means of seeing what resources were truly out there for. So I deal with depression and a couple of other things, and I never realized how much taboo was around there. But long story short, I learned how to navigate through corporate spheres and non-profit spheres alike in order to learn how to adapt and mitigate a lot of different things. And now I am working as the head of partnerships with ACH. To really try to help AAPI communities develop find resources to help them with their journeys. But yeah, that's the long and short of it. And I'll pass it to Dennis. I see.
Yeah, so hi, my name is Dennis. Like I am pronoun he, him. Like I am a social impact storyteller, DA advocate as a consultant. My career spans like a variety of sector, including entertainment, media, technology, digital media, public health, and at first like consulting. Because my diverse background just spans the right sector, navigating life as with disability and neurodivergence. I was late identified with autism back in 2020, and most recently a few years ago, and towards then become like aware of like ADHD and so more so like with CPSC. And so my journey has spanned life just like kind of like following traditional career path and realizing it wasn't sustainable for me. I guess wasn't designed for someone like me, and I kind of felt as like I struggled for so long with years trying to fit into a box when I realized that I wasn't meant to sustain in a box, and I always kind of felt like there was all this loads of stigma about mental health and opening up about like my disability and neurodivergence like really was a challenge. And I think for me it's like for the past few years have been just like being more in the advocate space and just like sharing my story, connecting with people, and like just advocating for others in the space. And that kind of led me to open to many different doors and opportunities along the way. And I also now serve like as a head of marketing slash head of vision for um Asian Connection Hub, but also like I am part of like a lot of different I advise a lot of startups and nonprofit organization along that as well. I'll pass it over to Angel.
Dennis. I'm so excited to learn more about everyone's stories here and just listen to everyone. But to share a bit about myself, I'm the second generation child of Chinese immigrants, grew up in the Midwest. Pronouns are she, her, hers. I currently lead growth at Anise Health and partnerships, which encompasses a few different hats, but it's anywhere from negotiating with payer partners to get value-based contracts that better compensate our providers and keep costs low for our clients. It's also a variety of marketing relationships, and then also doing community-based events with nonprofits, healthcare organizations, and university counseling centers. I think one thing I hope that we can learn from each other about is choosing a fulfilling work career that feels authentic to us. I know I myself struggled with trying to decide what could honor me and my personal values while also providing for the people that I care about. I had a lot of tension around being second generation and having almost like familial guilt and debt for my family. So that's something I'm happy to elaborate more and share upon as well. So with that, I'll pass it over to Michelle.
Cool. Well, hi, I'm Michelle. I run Sunnyside in ACH. And so I grew up a lot with not really understanding, I guess, like my cultural background as much. Like fought a lot with, the ideas of like, my parents coming here, they're like coming from a different perspective. And then I struggled a lot with that, along with me being born in America. Like it was really difficult. So there was a lot of challenges and obstacles in our relationship and just with my siblings and I, like it's such a weird experience when it comes to like when they're coming from a different country and they're like very new to being here in America. And then between how Americans think and how we kind of think about things, how we approach different things, our systems, our policies, different things. Like it's completely different. So struggled a lot with that growing up. So happy to elaborate, but that's something that kind of impacted my own mental health too. And so my pronouns, I totally forgot about that, but I go by she, her. I totally forgot about that. But I do hope to share more in terms of what people are curious about. But otherwise, I think I'll pass it to Deep. I think the last one.
Hey folks, I'm Deep. I go by they, them, theirs, or he, him, his, or any pronouns with respect. I'm based in SoCal right now. Originally grew up in Illinois, Northern Illinois, specifically in Gurnee. I immigrated to the US around like 2000, 2001. My mom was pregnant at the time, so we stopped in Texas first. That's where my brother was born. And then since then, for the last 20, 21 years, all my education was in the Midwest. I got into a lot of this work, and part of my motivation for this kind of like panel slash potential series would be kind of exploring how other folks also explored in our traditional path, because a lot of folks come from stories where we see the traditional mainframe for model minority myth and other pressures we dealt with at home at school. But then it was kind of refreshing to kind of think outside the box, meet people who kind of may have ended up at the same conclusion, but at a different route or path. And I think growing up, both in academia and then also handling like the nonprofit sector, I started mostly in healthcare and education. It was kind of enlightening to see that you can do a lot of good directly, sometimes beyond just going the traditional routes and startups. I know we're a lot of big things that we were exploring in the pandemic era. Right now, I'm with Napafasa and Napima. I'm consulting with them specifically for their mental health directory and policy analysis, especially for the upcoming presidential administration. I'll be working on resource sharing for the APIDA or the larger AANHPI community.
That's so exciting. And I realized I jumped the gun. I didn't even give much about some of my background. So I'm a fourth generation Chinese and Japanese American, and I grew up in the Southern California region, and now I'm in Washington. But for the rest of it, I will save that for the rest of the questions. So to kick us off, I have a couple of more warm-up questions, and this will be kind of free range if anyone of you wants to share, as well as any of you in the chat. Of course, you're also welcome to engage with us and answer any of the questions if you'd like to share. So the first one, I'm always so curious about this because I think as we're exploring our career journeys, sometimes we forget about the things that we aspired to be when we were younger. So one of the first questions I'd love to ask you all is, when you were younger, what are some of the professions you thought you were going to end up in, or maybe some interesting memories you had in relation to your career? One of the things for myself that I remember is when I was in college, I remembered my mindset back then because I had no frame of reference as far as careers and working and making money for a living, that I remember thinking that all I needed to do was to stay in the same job for 10 years and rise up the ranks to work up that kind of corporate ladder, take advantage of those annual increases of an amazing, 1 to 2% a year. And then I would be making big money at 70,000 after 10 years in order to live a comfortable life and just be, rolling in the dough. And I remember part of that was that I would just have to kind of suffer through it. And then once I got to the end of it, then I can just coast on by. So that was just something that I just remember being in that mindset. And once that was lifted, it was like life-changing for me, of like, wow, I can't believe that's what I thought my career aspirations were as a college student. So yes, if any of you would like to jump in and share, feel free to just unmute and yeah.
Similar to Kira, who shared in the chat, I wanted to be a figure skater, and it was because I saw Michelle Kwan and was like, wow, Asian people can do sports and they can be beauty and they can be athletic and they can be awesome. So I didn't even have the conception of like a profession besides what you wanted to do with your time.
That is so interesting, being a figure skater. imagine you would be like amazing, I bet. Because I could see it on TV, obviously, or be like in the Olympics. I remember growing up, I wanted to do like I guess the medical field, and like I think that's where I wanted to be like a PA, so a physician assistant. And then I was like thinking, oh, but wait, like I want to do like software engineering and then like start like coding and solving issues and problems. And um I ended up actually learning how to code a little bit at the age of like I think 10 or 11, and I was just trying to like learn how to do front end development because I was like, I don't know, like what if I'm not gonna have a job out of college? So I was like, if I'm doomed at the end of 4 years, then I will probably have to be my parents' wishes for me to be a pharmacist. Absolutely not, because why would I want to give drugs all day to people? Because that seems like really boring. So yeah, I was doing really weird things, I guess, at the age of 10 or 11. So
When I was growing up, I like have to kind of remember what I wanted to do because I've always been an artist that happens to like math and to socialize. I didn't really have too many people in real life that had my shared interests. A lot of my growing up space was on the internet, actually. So I've always been enamored with communities that were digital that sometimes bleed into real life ever since I was 8 years old. And as I got older, I got interested in things like different online games, their economies, and learning how to code these websites that I'd go on to and have different conversations with people all over the globe with how can I build those sort of communities. So I really got into thinking about these ecosystems from a systemic lens and a human lens early on and wanted to go that route, then realized during college that because my background, my family wasn't necessarily from the management consultant or data analytic background automatically, which made me realize that what would take somebody half as much effort might take me 4 times the effort. And that's when I began to reconcile with that and identify others that experience similar things to pivot into making what were roadblocks for me opportunities for other people as a result of having experienced said things.
I could definitely say that I think from my experience, I guess I didn't really have like a solid defined things of like what I want to do. It's more of like I knew like there's a lot of things growing up like in my family that was like kind of going on like around like health and all stuff. So I kind of was rooted in like healthcare was something that I kind of was passionate in at the time, but also kind of like make people's lives better. But I kind of realized I didn't really know exactly what that is or anything like that. I just know like I kind of want to what I want to do was like kind of improve people's life better. And then other aspect was like, being like Vietnamese and Asian American identity at the earliest age. I was like, I was always kind of just more like I didn't grow up in a predominant Asian area, and I kind of for me it's like I remember like being introduced to like boba like senior year of high school, and then that was like the very first time I was exposed to any of that stuff. And so that's why I was like, oh yeah, like when it comes to like I mean senior year project, it was like AP, Gov, Econ. We had like a business project, like you're gonna start a business, like what it's gonna be like and how profit. I was like, sure, I'm gonna be a boba business owner, so I'm gonna like help start my own business, boba like restaurant and stuff like that. And I think that's how I also started. I was like, yeah, like kind of like do that, but mostly not much anything consideration after that. But it kind of lean into like how it does like these aspects of community and like making people's life better and like health and stuff like it does somehow ties back into like everything I'm doing nowadays with my career in advocacy and storytelling and like mental health space and stuff like that. So it's like it does connect in some aspect of way, but it's like the path to get there was like much more like all over the place in a way. Yeah.
No, I resonate with especially what Dennis and Supreme were saying earlier about like kind of like when we were finding external influences, how it kind of like gave us a model or kind of shaped how we saw things growing up. So for me, I think the two dominant things were parents and friends. Because a lot of us grew up in model minority households, especially as Asian Americans. And one of the things that we were emphasized to double down on is our STEM education. And I would understand and empathize from the parental generation why that was the case. It was they wanted us to be safe, secure, economically viable so that we could, take care of ourselves, and they had their own version of the American dream in the process. And then with my peers, especially in grade school, you start to ramp up standardized testing, both at the state level and the private level. So College Board for the SAT, and then AP exams. And I noticed my friend group, the specific clique, was really garnering around the AP class structure. So we would have all the same classes, all the same schedules every time we post, and it became a competitive nature. And I noticed in terms of statistically looking at my friends and then the decisions I made, a lot of us did end up in STEM. And then about like a third of my friends became chemical engineers specifically. They went to Urbana-Champaign or UC. My younger brother also went to UIUC for systems engineering. So engineering and healthcare were like the predominant roles. And then the last thing I'll mention is that it kind of also shaped kind of the original pressures until college, because in college you kind of get to restart over again. And then reflection, I didn't dislike the science education or the emphasis because we all watch History Channel or National Geographic. Sometimes we're documentary nerds. And we enjoy getting that knowledge. But one thing, if we could do it all over again, is did we need as much of that emphasis as we originally needed? Could we have done more with the creative arts? I know that I really got into cooking in college. I got more into painting in late high school. And I realized I look at some of my friends who did have that relative autonomy, and maybe that's something we could start exploring again as we're, I guess, adulting into our late 20s and 30s.
I feel like I can relate to a little bit of what everyone has shared, so I think that's really cool. Thank you all. I'm gonna actually go into the main questions because we have so much to share. And so I'm going to pick on a couple of you to share, and then if there's a couple of reflections that anyone else would like to share, then we'll have a little time to do that. But the first one, I kind of want to take us a little bit on a journey. So I thought we might start a little more on the traditional side, corporate America, if you will. So just as some of you have already alluded to, the infamous doctor, lawyer, engineer. And so I'm going to start with Michelle for this one and then Angel. So Michelle, feel free to share a little more about your corporate ladder journey.
Yeah, so when I got into college, when you start getting into college, you're like, well, I don't know what to do. No idea what major is going to be. Am I going to have a job out of college? Am I going to be able to get a job during college? Am I going to be able to figure things out? I have no idea. So at the time, I was really honed in on like, okay, I'm going to get a job. I'm going to get a job. Whatever it is, I'm going to just get a job out of college or during college or keep something throughout college. And so I jumped around a lot actually. So I started getting into just random like admin assistant work or HR. So I became an HR, like I guess recruitment specialist for an HR firm for a bit. And then I did like construction hiring. I did hiring for Walgreens, corporate and store positions. And then I was like, well, I don't know about HR. I like talking to people, but also I feel like maybe I don't want to be in HR. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna jump around. And my major didn't really match what I was doing because I was a computer science major for 2 years. And then I switched to IT, a general, like broad IT degree. And then I ended up completing with that, which is, I don't know, seems useless. It's useless at this point. So I ended up jumping to a little bit into UI UX. And that's where I got into tech. And that's where my corporate really started ramping because by the time it was like, I think like end of 2019 until like 2020, I took it a little bit more seriously with UI UX. And I did a boot camp full time while in college in 2021. And I was like, okay, maybe this would be my corporate job. Maybe I'll climb the ladder. Let's see how it goes. And I kind of pushed myself to do this program within 4 months, completed in 4 months instead of 6 months. Usually it's 6 months, but I completed in 4 and then did in college on top of that full time and then that program full time. And that's okay. Let's find a job. Let's do something. So I ended up getting a contract role at an agency here in Texas. It was in Austin, but I was located in Wisconsin at the time, so I was fully remote. And I ended up kind of trying that out for like a couple months. And then I jumped into full-time position because they offered me full-time. So I did full-time there by the summertime. So I started like in May of like 2021 there, and then into the summer and like the end of August. And then from there, I was like, okay, interesting. I like agency work. I like website designs. I like that. I've been doing website design throughout my life. And then I jumped into a bit more like SaaS products. So more so like a company that focuses on like one product but sells as a service. So with that being said, people will like, companies will buy that product so they could use it for their own like teams and that stuff, and we would like maintain it and things like that. So that's more like the SaaS world. And then so I jumped into construction tech and then did that for a little bit. And then I worked as like kind of like an entry-level product designer. And then I jumped into more of like a lead UX design role. And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna take it a step further. So I jumped into a lead design role, probably like within like a span of a year. And then I led a full team of designers and some engineers, and I worked with like senior level people. I was above them, so I was like, I guess like managing them, a few of them. And so I ended up also like leading like some entry-level designers, mid-level, and then I had like a senior designer above me, I guess like the manager or director, and then I was able to kind of collaborate and do really cool stuff for like the 401k side. And when you're ready to retire, then I did a little bit of financial, and then I jumped again into private equity, and then that's where I worked on HRPEO, which I've never heard of HRPEO. So then I did that for a little bit, and my ladder of corporate was kind of weird. It was like I led something, I was kind of taking ownership of projects, I kind of worked solo a lot, a little bit of collaboration, but it was very interesting, also pretty intense in tech. So I have always just kept jumping, and that's where I learned so much of my experiences, and it wasn't really a typical route. And then after, I guess, private equity, I kind of jumped into other agency work and did some stuff for more, I guess, Fortune 500 companies. And so it was just kind of a crazy jump, and it's not traditional to like do crazy things throughout college and then like after, like I'm still doing those crazy things. So I think that's been kind of a weird, I guess, journey for me, but I've been doing a lot of crazy things, I guess, and still sane. So I guess that works. So yeah.
I love the bumper sticker of just doing crazy things. Like if that's your LinkedIn slogan, it's a great recap.
Well, I probably should.
Well, okay, if your tagline is like Michelle's career doing crazy things, which I love, because it just helps challenge the stereotypes of like Asians climbing the corporate ladder. I think mine would be like the slogan would probably be like the tension between doing good and doing well. And what I mean by that is I just remember being 18 and going into college and being both so idealistic and optimistic and being like, world peace is achievable. We can do this, humanity. Like, give me all of the information. I remember when I was an RA, we would do these icebreakers, like, what is one skill if a genie could grant you any wish? Like, what would the skill be? And I was like, the ability to read every book instantaneously and absorb all the information. And then I think something about college in New York, all these narratives around life is expensive, and if you don't succeed now, you'll get off the track, like really hit home. And you could see that in the internships I did between the beginning half of my college experience and the later half. Like my freshman and sophomore year, I worked at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Turkey. I was traveling all around Ankara and in the Middle East. And my sophomore summer, I was working at this really boutique public affairs consulting firm in Madrid, Spain, also all around Europe. And then junior and senior year, I found myself management consulting. How did consulting do that? How did they take all these bright minds and then convince them that we needed to make PowerPoint decks? But I wrestled with that by graduating from Columbia a semester early and then working in a refugee camp off the coast of Turkey for several months, serving over 1,000 Syrian, Iraqi, and Afghani migrants. Just myself being a highly privileged person who can hold an American passport, and being born in one of the wealthiest countries in the world, I just kept asking, like, why me? Like, why was my family the only one that was able to immigrate from China? Why was I born with this passport that could allow me to walk into any country without any concerns? And why are these other people who are fleeing from their home countries, who want other things that we do, like good quality of life, education, stability, not able to do that? But then after the refugee camp, I was like, nonprofits are resource strapped. You have to martyr yourself. You are always going like paycheck by paycheck. Maybe businesses could be a force for good. So then I swung over and did consulting for 2 years. So it's just kind of funny how I go back and forth. But I did my 2 years in management consulting at Carney. I was working these really cool consulting jobs, like negotiating with suppliers in Shenzhen, which, fun fact, it was a hunting client in Kansas. I was the only woman on this 10-person team. I was the most junior person and the only Asian person. And I was constantly given the like, Angel, can you get lunch? Angel, can you get coffee? And I just humbly did it. And then they arrived in China and realized they had no Mandarin translators. And so I ended up running like most of the negotiations simply because I could actually understand what they were saying. And it was, I love that. But I was also staffed on a hunting client deal. And when I was sourcing gun parts, I was like, okay, my time in consulting is done now. And then I went and joined Meta's elections integrity team, going back to my political science roots. At like 25 years old, I was given reins to a $90 million account classifying political ads for the US elections from 2018 to 2020. Just wild Saturday morning fire drills like a Bernie Sanders impersonation campaign is happening right now. And the Sanders campaign is threatening to write to the Huffington Post if we don't like figure out who the inauthentic actors are in 2 hours. I remember literally being in the dressing room being like, oh my God, I need to go on my computer right now. But a really interesting inside look into how social media, being a free tool and having so much of people's data and advertising being the main source of revenue, actually like off puts a lot of societal harm onto other stakeholders. And so it just gave me a very like realpolitik view of how do you change the system from within. And also at my first year of Facebook, 3 directors I reported into were all fired, and they were all women, and 2 of them were East Asian women, which led me to want to better understand diversity in tech leadership. So that's why I joined Harvard Business School in 2020. At that point, I thought I wanted to do ethical tech, misinformation, disinformation in elections. So I interned at TikTok, the first time that my name and my background in a tech company like gave me access to different conversations and rooms. And I entered at Twitter when Musk acquired the company, and like 60% of the company left either voluntarily or forced attrition. That was also fascinating, to be with the corporate lawyers and be like, do we sue him or is he going to be our future boss and we defend him? And after all of that, I was like, I think I'm done with big tech. I'm ready to take more risk in my life. I'm ready to leave all these traditional paths. I've like gotten all the degrees. I've gotten all the name brands. I've made my parents proud. Like, what would make me proud? And that's why I've joined Anise, the first digital behavioral health company that provides an innovative form of culturally responsive care dedicated specifically for the Asian community. And yeah, it's kind of the first time I've taken that leap into entrepreneurship to do something that's not a big brand. You know, we could fail in a few years. We could be spectacularly successful. Who knows? But yeah, so thanks for giving me the space to share a bit.
Yeah, these stories are so exciting. But also in the interest of time, I'll probably just have each of us share and then we'll save reflections for the end. But thank you. That's so exciting, like to hear your different journeys, both of you. And so next I wanted to go on the topic of transferable skills. And so in this section, I'd like to invite Dennis to start with, how you got into tech. And I think you have a little bit of a ebbing and flowing journey, just like the 2 that we just heard. And then Supreme, how you went from volunteering for your communities and eventually turning that into a career path. So Dennis, if you'd like to get us started with this.
Yeah, so I think for me, it's like in terms of my career, I majored in public health during my time at UC Irvine. The funny thing was like during the time when I majored at school at UC Irvine, the school system like only prepared me for like traditional healthcare work, and I was like, and I didn't really want to do anything in the traditional healthcare work. I was really very passionate about like public health as a concept and like preventive care and stuff like that, but our U.S. healthcare system wasn't even considered in preventive care mode, and it was, and no one really knew what public health was with my degree at the time. Like, even when I tried to graduate with public health degree, people didn't know what that was. People were like, "Oh, like, is it to like biology? Is it like pre-med?" I was like, I didn't want to do any of that stuff, and so it was very difficult for me to kind of like have that translate into a job. So for me, it's like during undergrad, I heard like from a lot of people who graduate during that time, like, was that people who are graduating before me also say like, oh, job market is very hard to get jobs. It's taking a long time. He was like, so I know the harsh reality. So I was like, okay, I need to start getting experiences now. So I kind of figure out how to like build up my resume, build up my skill set. And of course, it was very difficult because of like I couldn't get a job because I didn't know what to do about it because public health was very broad and not necessarily anything specific. So then remember just like UC Irvine, people told me to get involved in research. And so for me, it's like I was very bad academically with school and stuff like that. So I was a poor test taker. So it was really difficult for me to like get good grades and stuff like that. And I think also my late neurodivergence also like another thing factor to that contribution. But it ultimately led me to do like rather than just like taking classes, I could just do research, and then that could be an easy A. So I could just like get boost on GPA and stuff like that. So they did a lot of research. So they did research in clinical setting. They did a lot of clinical research. Did a lot of grant writing research with nonprofit as well. So I kind of like stacked myself with research experiences and stacked myself up with experiences. And one of the experiences that I got that I took upon was like in clinical research at UC Irvine Medical Center, where I was like working with iPad and working on like clinical outcome research survey on like with patients. And during that time, it's like, and seeing the different innovation that was in healthcare at the time. But at the same time, it's like when it comes to applying for jobs, it's like no one's healthcare wasn't even there yet. Healthcare was very behind. Like you don't see paper record. You're still on paper record. You still see on a lot of these like traditional like healthcare jobs. So pretty much like when I kind of applied to jobs, they're like, what are you doing here? Like, what are you trying for these jobs? I was like, I don't know. I realistically actually need to get a job because I need to get a job. And it's like, but at the same time, they're like, you're too ahead, like, and you're still like, we see the future's going, but you're not, but we're here now, then you're still there. So it's also very, very difficult for me where I definitely knows like I'm very like innovative and kind of in that space because my experience has like led me down this path. So I kind of was like, yeah, it's very difficult. And it's like I was like getting rejected left and right. And and then I was like, like I remember taking a college like a business and science like call courses in like UC Irvine where they kind of talk about like healthcare and like kind of like challenge the status quo in the pharmaceutical industry and like kind of drug things. And so I kind of like was very interested in that. And then and then kind of saw like one day I kind of saw like a job portal open of like for the startup like in healthcare, like lifestyle healthcare and social commerce. And then I was like, I'm just gonna apply for it. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just gonna apply for it. I'll do anything. And then pretty much like yeah, surprisingly, they pretty much like contact me. They're like, what do you want to do? I was like, I don't really know what I want to do, but like administrative, maybe healthcare administrator or something like that. Like at least like something that I can like advocate to myself. And then, and then they end up interviewing me and they saw like a lot of transferable skill set that I had, like because I actually one of the jobs that I had like in undergrad was working at Fruit Fly Lab. So I was doing a lot of like procedural stuff, like standard operating procedure and like food cook and kind of following through that and like just making sure that everything is like accurate and measurable. So I took that knowledge and be able to apply it into a business aspect with their medical skincare product line and like a social commerce platform. Is like because I need to kind of like take those transferable skill set and apply it in a business setting and just like kind of like apply the business concept because I told him I was like I'm interested in learning the business side of it because I had no idea of like anything because I have a academic background and academic research and all this stuff, but I didn't really know the business side as much of it. So it was like kind of good exposure there, working in the quality department and just like kind of like managing the product development aspect of it, all the skincare product line, the packaging and labelings of it, and just kind of getting through that. And then from there, it's kind of like also using transferable skill set there, like when the company went through like a financial crisis, one of their software vendor one of the things they venture was needing a software called return tester, and I was like, I didn't really like knew what I want to do either. I was like, I just need another job because I was like out of job, and so I was like, and then so I reached out to my department team member in the marketing team my own company. I was like, hey, I need help with getting a job. Can you help me? And then kind of reach out and they're like, and then he's going to kind of reach out to the software vendor, and then software vendor like kind of told me, look at my profile. He was like, oh, like, you have iPads, and this is not healthcare, but you have iPad experience, and we do survey and stuff like that. It's like we want to be software tester. We need software tester. I'm like, sure, I'll do it. Like I'll do it, and I was just like kind of like learn round up. So then that's how I got into software testing and QA testing in general, and just product development. And yeah, and just kind of using transferable skill set there, like just being able to be able to advocate for myself in that way, where I was like, hey, I happen to happen to have certain experiences that's I can connect to my current job right now, whereas like before, where I was able to leverage like using iPads and surveys and using that into aspect of navigating surveys and tools for businesses as well, like using iPads and collections, and it being a software tester to kind of test the product to make sure it is accessible and user friendly for people from a non-technical background. And I was like, I didn't know, like I didn't think about myself there. And it's just kind of for me, it's just kind of one thing led to another. And I kind of took that thing to like other industry as well. Like as I kind of gone to that, where like from QA to like being in media entertainment to even consulting, right? It's like kind of been like I kind of noticed like how like I kind of done a lot of different things and use this skill set to kind of like, hey, I just like be able to help other people, help our organization with like these different experiences I have, skill set that I have. And it kind of for me it's like it really is just like you're not defined by your box, you're not defined by your major. Like I think that's like overall key takeaway is like for me, it's like I realized that like you're not stuck with your major, you're not stuck with like certain industry. It's okay to like pivot, it's okay to change, or it's also like okay to be adaptable to different opportunities, because like I think now, although I feel like looking back, I always feel like a very imposter syndrome being in all these sort of industry, because I was like, how did I even get here? Like how did I even land these roles? But then at the same time I realized that like, these opportunities like that I was able to land, it kind of like now like I can definitely pivot or kind of shift gears into the different industry and be like, oh, I can do this or that, or like if I get bored of one industry, I could move up to the other one, or like if it's like where layoffs and stuff like that happens, like in one industry, I was like, oh, I'm not trapped in one industry. I can definitely tap into the different sectors.
Yeah, I think that imposter syndrome is especially a huge topic that comes up, especially when you come from an untraditional background or want to explore untraditional pathways. And honestly, my upbringing, my parents and everybody, they were comfortable with me doing whatever made me feel happy. But at the same time, being an only child from a low income first generation family, I public schooling in a district there are there are a decent amount of people in that similar situation where they had to carve the resources out and communities out for themselves in order to figure out what was going on. So my foray in volunteering actually started as me being a junior in high school, worried about whether I was going to even make it to college, not knowing whether I was going to be able to afford it, what a FAFSA was, or what made me unique, what that even constituted, the whole 9 yards of the standardized testing, how to stand out to these big figures, and really, really navigating raising my own village to raise myself as a child. So I've always been in the arts. artists are like startups. They have to wear 9 different hats and advocate for themselves in different capacities to actually get some sort of traction. And luckily, through doing arts organization, volunteering, or the National Health Society for mental health related things in high school, like advocating for our my friends, who a lot of them, like a lot of artists, deal with different mental health issues and a bunch of other things, advocating for them. That uh, I did a lot of that stuff because I wanted to communicate that going into college, which was supposed to be the precursor to real life. And it's kind of funny how that proving ground, I had to, in doing that, I was able to use that as a means of getting into arts liaison opportunities in college. Began to think about communities that were in my position, where how can I put myself in a better position to better others, where I am the one cousin or random person that teaches somebody about SAT prep materials that are for free, or how to go to networking events that are right to the nearest library or something. Being able to just put myself out there and be an example for other people in like helping people edit their cover letters or give free headshots or just make these platforms for the lives of at least a couple of people at the very least to be changed. And what I've found, I guess, is that in volunteering, you meet a lot of people who happen to know a lot of people in turn as well. So what happens is that resources tend to collect in that manner, and at the end of the day, I feel like people who are at the hiring end of the table, there's some companies, nonprofits and otherwise, that really appreciate the anybody who is able to take sense of grassroots initiative and representation and be bold, especially in areas that don't often see that person who is an artist, or that person who's neurodivergent, or that person who's unapologetically from an underrepresented population, but has raw energy and impact. Um, yeah.
In fact, I feel so seen to the point where I feel like my skeleton, I just see my skeleton. I am a youngin' back in my day, right? I'm like half all your ages. And yet all of this in my generation, I think it's like as college prices increase, we are told, oh, you have to go to college to get a job. That's not how that works. That shouldn't be how it works. Why are we gatekeeping education, which should be a human right? And so I've learned that why go to college? I don't need college to teach myself skills. And so I slowly started to learn how to use skills I learned in high school to build off of and do things that like my school did not support me. When I tried making an organization representing Asian Americans in my school, this Ohio school, they're like, nah, we're good. It's like, okay. And then suddenly I see, oh, a Hispanic group. Oh, you support them now. Okay. It was very frustrating. But like, I think I am that person to be like, I am not going to let you, I will say it how it is. I see this whole corporate America and the way we function in society. And I think it shows it's hard to break out of that mold, but like you can't break the system by participating in it as much as you can by calling it out for what it is. I don't care if you wear a suit, you are human like me, you are not above me. Like, it's just that easy.
Thanks for sharing. And that actually segues nicely into our next section, which is going to be on the advocacy side of things. And so, even though all of us are champions for things like mental health and bringing representation and supporting our AAPI communities and our other intersectional communities and identities, I wanted to invite Deep to share a little bit more about how this has transformed into your advocacy journey. And then I'll share a little bit after that as well. So, Deep, go for it.
Yeah, no, I definitely resonate. Again, this actually connects back to the imposter syndrome that Dennis and Supreme were talking about. It also relates to what Angel was saying earlier when you were kind of in an international space and you had to figure out things on the spot, and which was for better or worse, it's kind of thrust upon us as young people to kind of take on higher responsibilities because sometimes the structures we enter are not ready for us when we are in those spaces. So from my background, I guess I grew up in a very like moderate to conservative town in northern Illinois. It wasn't like hostile to like progressive values as much. It was just mostly kind of a sleepy town. And we had Six Flags Great America, and it was kind of a brand mall area. And the reason I mention that culture is because that's kind of what framed my understanding of social issues. So I didn't really have an opinion on things until college because it gave me a break from the space I grew up in, and also a break from the usual friend conversations I was in. I was extremely lucky to have Black, Latino, and Indigenous friends from New York in college that exposed me to an understanding of race, gender, sexuality, disability, etc., on a way that I did not confront before. Because again, it's predominantly white where I grew up, including our college in central Wisconsin called Lawrence University. And even for the few students of color on campus and the programming that we were able to do, it was those late night discussions at dorm rooms all the way to like study seminar rooms that really propelled us to imagine a world beyond the scope of what are our parents telling us, what are our political leaders telling us, heck, what are our own professors telling us that we can imagine beyond. So it felt like there was like a lot of restless energy, and at that time, my, I guess, loyalty was towards academia. And to a partial extent, it still is because I'm a bookworm. The way I see things, I need to understand things textually, so through whether it's video content, conversations, or books. And then I'm able to interact with it on a deeper level. But at the same time, it kind of caused a disillusionment period. To Kira's earlier statement about the gatekeeping of higher education, that's kind of the case when you leave college. You don't get access to a lot of the subsidized resources you originally had. So, for example, we didn't really get free therapy because we were all paying through our parents for college, but you did get access to therapy there without it being a primary concern on your head until you had to graduate and beyond there as well. There was also career services and a repertoire of other things you could get access to. And I think in retrospect, in terms of advocacy work, the easy thing for me to do is tell people find your passion, find an issue, find an organization, and find a community. But the harder truth to first dispel with is actually focus on your individual sustainability and well-being first. So go, please seek out therapy. Please seek out friend groups that affirm a healing and gentle upbringing for yourself. Please seek out mentors that actually co-develop with you. They're not just there to extract labor from you for the sake of their organization. They care about your trajectory. You can call back 5, 10 years later on the phone, via text, online, and still talk as colleagues and friends. And then last but not least, career and housing equity and development too. So making sure that those pillars are in place because we have our whole lives to make a single difference. And a lot of us here, we're very multi-interested. We want to make a lot of differences. But if you're not economically stable or housing stable first, it can be difficult to do those things. Now, I understand as I'm saying that the millennials and Gen Z have the hardest entry into this craven economy that a lot of us are struggling with right now. A lot of us are living to paycheck to paycheck. Healthcare is a lot. A lot of us are starting chronic degenerative diseases a lot earlier than we're supposed to. I think for our generation, it was the first time that lifespan expectancy actually went down. And then we also have a higher incidence of stomach-related or GI-related chronic diseases, such as stomach cancer, gastroenteritis, IBS. Now, some of it could just be people reporting for the first time, hey, I have these things, but it's also concerning that we live in a very stressful environment that induces these things in the first place. Hidden conversations from our parents' generations that we didn't know about until we enter the workforce. Because I think a lot of us can empathize with seeing our parents working multiple hours, making any ends meet from anywhere from immigrant towns. If a lot of us grew up with parents working in the restaurant industry or in the white collar area, where my parents, for example, grew up in the IT management industry. So in terms of the advocacy work, when addressing sustainability, I guess the thing I also want to like summarize too is um, making sure that what you want to do doesn't have to be a rushed product. Meaning, I think if I could redo my early 20s, instead of doing like 10, 20, 50 projects, I would have just waited and observed and developed what I was doing already, and then organically found the support spaces I needed to thrive on. For example, I moved to California 3 years ago from Illinois. I've enjoyed my time here. It's been very uh, cannot say the word, so I'll say there's been a lot of reciprocity in terms of what I give to my organizations and how they look out for me. My main mentor right now is my executive director, Mariel Reataza for Napa FASA. She always asks staff, how are you economically? How are you emotionally? How are you, with how things are going in the national spotlight? And because of those things, I'm able to accelerate my advocacy work, whether it's data archiving for different groups I'm trying to share out to folks so that they get the right direct resources for mutual aid, or if it's just connecting on a individual leadership pipeline. For instance, for me, one of the biggest things I was working on is public speaking. When I entered the United States, I did 7 years of ESL from first grade to seventh grade. And I realized that it happened in that context because the white teachers, which let's be honest, this is unfortunately still the majority of the education workforce, didn't understand the difference between American and British spelling. Since I come from India, a former colony of Britain, spelled things like color like COLOUR instead of COLOR. So when American teachers got a hold of me, aka when I immigrated here, they couldn't tell the difference. They honestly thought I couldn't speak, read, write, whatever, and they put me in ESL. Now, I'm not against extra education because that's what ESL felt like, but it's those micro choices that kind of partially segregated me from my other classmates during English speaking classes. The reason I mention that is because it caused me a 20-year mindset that I was never able to communicate or be articulate enough. Now I know differently because I'm in spaces that affirm a different narrative. But I think that's the key part in advocacy is making sure you go to spaces that don't just give you material resources to thrive in your work, but on an immaterial level, whether it's representation, affirming your skill set, or just your just dignity based on what you're trying to accomplish and what you mean to others, that they uplift them. And I think the more observant we are with that, the more likely you're to thrive. And if you feel like you haven't achieved a single thing in your 20s, totally fine. Um, the last thing I'll mention is the example of Oprah Winfrey. I think around 27, 28, she got fired from a major news network. And someone in that age range would think, oh, wow, like my career's tanked. I can't do anything now because I got fired from a major news org, but you see where she's at right now. Now, I don't want to glorify her example, but I do want to remind people that you can make a difference when you're young, but you also don't have to make a difference when you're young. You can wait it out, develop yourself, get the right support, and then when the time's right, you can make the difference you need to make when the opportunity arises.
As a young person, let me tell you, I started canvassing when I was 4 years old for a presidential campaign. I got votes, baby. I was so charismatic. I like this little Asian child. I'm gonna vote. But that's besides the point. As a young person, I constantly have to come to terms with the fact that I love to do stuff. I love to create change and leave an impact on this world. I don't want to just like be a speck of dust that just goes poof at the end of life. I want to actually have some leftover residue. And I think for me, it's like I also have to come to terms with the fact that as a young person, these responsibilities should not be put onto me. I shouldn't have to tell people, stop ruining our environment. You're gonna make me die young. Stop that. Stop killing the earth. I shouldn't have to tell them, corporate America is part of the problem. I shouldn't have to tell them that, like, you shouldn't have to be mistreated and abused in your workplace. And I'm not going to work there and let you abuse me because it's a teen job. A job is a job. Your age is your age. Two separate concepts. I shouldn't have to be the one to tell adults these things. And yet I find myself telling adults a lot of this. And it's kind of a poetic irony of like doing what I love, but also knowing that I shouldn't have to do it in the first place, which sucks, but it's also like I kind of enjoy it. So I can't really say I don't want to, I want to stop it, but it's more of like, it's very tiring. And I think it's like exhausting to be, especially as like neurodivergent, being gaslit by society constantly, being told, oh, this is how you should think. This is what you should do. There is no other way. Okay, well, obviously there is because I have an imagination. I have a brain. Like, what? And you kind of realize that, like, once you break through that, you're like, this is all propaganda. This is all that. And it's just all the things you've been told to kind of accept and be internalized as normal, such as more heavier topics, such as war, because of a lot of our families are immigrants who come from war. It's like, you know, we're told, oh, you have to be the perfect American citizen. Okay, but they clearly don't want us in the country, but they want our labor and our food and our culture. And they love the anime. Something doesn't add up. I'm starting to think there's a bit of a racism here. You start connecting the dots. And I think as a young person, I should never have come to any of this conclusion this young. But unfortunately, I had to survive and be accepted, even though it still feels like I'm not.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times it can be a double-edged sword because on one end, you are all having to come to these truths and realizations at such a young age. And on the other end, speaking from experience, I didn't find out as well until it was much later. And I realized once COVID happened, when I finally stopped for a second and I kind of had to stay in the house and wasn't driving around hundreds of miles like every week, waking up before the sun came up and then coming home like so late at night, barely having time for any regular meals and normal meals. I didn't have any inkling as to what was really happening. And this is coming from being in the financial industry for 5 years. And it was halfway through that, career that COVID happened. And that is not the start of my personal advocacy journey, but I would say it was one of the major turning points for me. Up until that point, I had been in a relationship that was I was so uncomfortable with coming out in the workplace. There were a few people that I told that were close colleagues or friends of mine, eventually family and things like that. But I think for me, I didn't really know a lot of who I was for a long time, and that was really difficult. And for me, one of the values that I hold really strong is authenticity. And so I felt like I was kind of in this position where I was almost forced to lie all the time about who I was or sit there and to this day I still occasionally have people assume that I have a boyfriend or a husband. And, and sometimes those memories come back a little bit of like, what do I do in this moment? Do I correct them? Do I, let it go? Because we're not going to ever talk about this topic ever again. This might be a one-time exchange. But it wasn't until later, like several years later, after I finally became more open. Part of it was because I could hide behind the internet because I didn't have to see people in person anymore. And, coming out, whether or not they liked it or not, I blasted it everywhere, and every single picture of me had rainbows. And I made it so apparent because I'm like, okay, This is the point for me that if they don't like who I am, no big deal. I don't see them anymore. It's a lot easier to separate over the internet than when you're going to, for myself, I went to networking meetings multiple times a week. I was constantly in community, I was volunteering. And every time I was in these conversations, it was like I didn't realize that there was this underlying fear on one hand, and also this energy that was being drained just from having to kind of pretend. And always wonder that even when somebody says, hey, how was your weekend? And maybe I went to a Pride event, or maybe I went to something that I'm like, oh no, what do I say? Can I even tell them what I did over the weekend? And I just didn't realize how much mental energy that I was spending on that. And so bringing it back around when COVID happened, and I started to recognize there was one specific meeting that I went to. And it was about a dozen different people, and this was in the financial industry. And I just remembered that we were all being asked how we were doing. And I was listening to everyone speak, and a lot of people who had been there in the industry for several years. They had really strong books of business, they had their clients, and they were in wealthier communities, and they were stable. And they were pretty much like, everything's great, barely any changes, maybe a few inconveniences. And of course, I was the one to speak last. And I was just like, this experience doesn't actually match anything that I'm experiencing right now. At the time, my desk was a tiny standing desk, and my bed was my chair. Other people, especially parents who were working from home, maybe they were newer to the industry, they were holding meetings in their bathrooms. They had shower curtains behind them. They were having meetings laying down on their bed and using virtual backgrounds. And they were struggling. A lot of people that I knew were having major mental health struggles. They were struggling to feel supported. And that's a lot of when my advocacy journey started. I tried advocating for mental health services. Like, hey, 90% of the people around me who are either women, people of color, they're from the LGBT community. Like, I'm hearing stories of struggle, and this doesn't seem to match what other people coming from places of privilege were, relaying or sharing. And so those things just didn't match. And that really was one of the key moments for me where I realized that being in an industry where the solutions to deal with your struggles and the stresses of life was to reach out to more people and to try to make sales, as if money solves everything. In those moments when you're struggling, talking to even your closest friends can be really hard, let alone trying to sell people or do business with people, when 90% of the phone calls I was taking was about people who were struggling and didn't know whether they were going to have a job the next day or the next week, and their businesses were failing or having to close down. So it's just when you took that stress and the impact on people, and then you have us who that's all the conversations we're having every single day, and just holding that emotional weight for people. It was really taxing on me, and it really, really burnt me out. And I still love that experience that I had, in the sense that it really gave me a different perspective to approach the type of advocacy work that I do, in the way that I approach mental health conversations, because I know that what that taught me was those who were going to advocate for things that actually supported people and what they needed, and when the support wasn't there. And so I really, as an Asian woman, an LGBT woman within certain industries and holding certain privileges, I almost feel like it's part of my duty to help be a voice and representation to the communities. And so, yeah, that's kind of the background to my advocacy journey. And I know that we're really running up on time, and we had a whole other section, but I did want to at least take a pause, hear from anybody on reflections, anyone tuning in from the audience.
Hi there, everyone. I just wanted to say what an inspiring group of folks that I just heard from. I am in probably in my kind of midway through my life, and I was struggling with the realizations that you all discussed. And Kira, when you said earlier, why do I have to deal with this at my age, at a young age? I think I think that in some respect, I feel like you're lucky. I wish I had opened my eyes earlier to some of the challenges and barriers. And it wasn't until Sam was going through her DI journey that she just discussed that I realized, holy crap, I've been experiencing that throughout my career, but I was just blind, maybe even numb to it. When you're a fish in the water, you don't see the water, realize you're in water. You think it's normal. So it wasn't until then that I realized the challenges I had been facing throughout my career are not imagined. They are real. I even internalize a lot of that. And so hearing all you young folks speak, it is just so inspiring, and keep up the good work. And I can't wait to meet with you in some way or another, or work with you in some capacity.
But like, I think a lot of you guys kind of mentioned how I opened my eyes at a very young age. Honestly, I don't think it was a choice for me. I kind of was forced to, because I was different, because I was always like physically born with like a cleft lip and palate. I looked different. I was sounded different. My whole life was just around different. So I had no choice but to wonder, why is all these people around me really red in the summer when I'm getting darker? How does that work? What's happening? Hold on, guys. There's something. And I think I realized that like I had no choice but to confront these. But it's I think they say ignorance is bliss. Yeah, there's sometimes I'm like, oh, I really wish I didn't have to think about this capitalism, but lo and behold, but then there's parts of me that are thankful because I don't want to just be a cog in the machine. I want to have my own autonomy.
Oh, I just feel so grateful and fortunate to have been able to listen in on this panel. Like, so much knowledge and life experience, and just the resources that you've collected over your lives, being in the experience. Like, it's just been so great. So thank you.
Yeah, does anyone else? Angel, Michelle, Dennis, you haven't spoken in a little while.
And honestly, thank you, Sam, for moderating. I know that takes a lot of energy and love, so big kudos. Something I see as a recurring trend is, given that we are all able to speak English, residing in America, operating in systems that have inequities, how best do we affect change while also caring for ourselves? And I think there are many different ways in which that can be possible, while acknowledging the personal and individual strengths and passions that we bring to the table, while also taking care of people, loved ones in our lives that we're also responsible for. And I think even just having that willingness to not like fold in and just say, I give up, let me just, give me my golden handcuffs and I'll just post all the highlights on my social media and feel good about myself. I think just the striving in and of itself is very noble, and perhaps that is part of like a very human experience that we'll all reflect upon. I think I experienced a lot of that cognitive dissonance in business school. We had a section around challenges, but I felt like I had to do a lot of code switching between needing to walk the walk, speak the lingo, and not come off too activisty. And it's like kind of a fascinating space to be a chameleon in the business world, where in the US, like money and power in politics in particular do have long lasting consequences. And like oftentimes the calculus in my head is, how long do I hang on in this environment that's like kind of personally toxic for me, but to try to accumulate as many resources and connections to make the impact I want to in the future? And like, how do I preserve my own innocence so that I don't even start like drinking the Kool-Aid that is just doused to us over and over again? I think just being able to connect and speak quite frankly and in a raw manner with people who just remind you that, yeah, to Kira's point, like we literally are no different. We were born into this world with no suits, no heels, no purses. Like there's a spiritual side of me that believes that who knows where I'll be in the next world, but like I won't be taking any of my material possessions with me. And maybe the only thing I can do is like to try to learn and be a good person and try to make this world a little bit better. So I will just say, for anyone who feels like they are code switching or being a social chameleon or a little bit of guilt even to operate in spaces that maybe aren't as purist in the fight, I think just having eye on the long-term prize is a good and noble fight too.
So well said, Angel. That was so well said. I connect a lot with that too, especially with like I think within like my way of like growing up and the way I've done things, like my parents were always so hard on me, like you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to go to college, you do all this and that, and hope and pray that you'll come out alive and you'll do just fine. But like in reality, it's like, I've kind of looked back at where like my journey was at. Is like I've just always pushed, push, push. I would never just stop, stop, stop. I would keep going because I was worried that like I wouldn't be able to get where I wanted to be. And I think I set myself on this high like expectation for myself. Is like I want to be successful. I want to do all these things, make my parents proud, but it's like, why can't I do something that makes me happy? And like, why do I have to do things that make my parents happy? Because like it doesn't feel right. And so for me, I always felt like, like the more I push and all these career paths, all these different things I did in college and having these big jobs and big salaries, like I thought, oh, I made it great. Like I'm not even having to worry about money or whatever. And like being at a college student, being so young, and then like having all these terrible bosses, terrible managers, and terrible work culture, super toxic. Tech is so toxic for me. And the moment I got out of it, like 5 years later, I was like, oh, okay, now I can breathe. I can like do different things. And now I'm doing a whole different career, focus on different things. And now I'm like kind of taking a step back. It's like, why did I push so hard? And like I now just like kind of remember all these different like mental health struggles and different things that I've experienced. And even like the first like 2 years of doing UI UX, I actually went to the hospital twice. And then like I was just like in full, like I guess it was like a huge like body mental health breakdown, but it wasn't like anything medically wrong with me. But I only had like a collapsed lung out of all of it, but it was chaotic and it was like a span of like crazy things happening to me. And I was like, why am I pushing so hard to be where I wanted to be? But I burned out and then like I just couldn't do it anymore. And so that really like took a big toll on me. And I usually don't talk about it, but like now that we're talking about all this, it's like I feel like I want to share more of it, but like in different ways, but like maybe like not as much, but to the extent. But like it was just so crazy, like being in the hospital for hours and like waiting and waiting. And it was just so crazy. It's like, is something really wrong with me? Am I really like pushing myself over the edge? Am I really gonna die? Who knows? But I think it was just such a wild time. But I really connect with that a lot. But also like I think now I've been trying to be more kind to myself and like not push as hard. So I've been trying to like step back and then not do things anymore and like really put less on my plate and to not be where I was in the hospital like back in like 2022. So that was crazy times. But
Oh no, I was just gonna resonate to the last few comments folks shared as well, especially on personal health and sustainability as well. Um, I think one thing that our generation is getting good at, and I think we've heard this term before, but it's called power mapping. Essentially, you look at the space you're in and you figure out not just the org chart, but actually what is the behind the scenes meaning behind the relationships behind the org chart. And the reason that matters is because in a lot of advocacy work, when you want to engage systemic change, whether you pass a bill in Congress or you do mutual aid work or you're doing direct services like healthcare, legal clinics, whatever, you need to know the community partners that are involved, who's all the players. Because if this was like game theory, it's like what are all the video game players that are involved? And not to be reductive of that, because I know these are like serious issues, but at the same time, it also helps to know, like, by reading your gut, what is a good space for you or not. So for instance, I feel like a lot of us here, we came from spaces that didn't align a lot with what we're trying to do. And a part of that was kind of a gut check that was hidden. And the reason I mention that is because now, as we're thriving into our relative spaces and figuring out honestly, like what matters to us and what's actually going to create material change for our communities, we reflect and we would say, well, I can't go back in time, but what I can do is tell people younger than me, entering the same pipeline, what to avoid and stuff. So I think the biggest thing in reflection to personal health, well-being, and then also knowing if organizations walk the walk, not just talk the talk. Because I've been in a lot of performative spaces where they use activist language, they use DEI, they use a lot of uh, marketing and stuff. But if you notice at the national level, it's trendy. Like Black Lives Matter is not trending on Twitter anymore. Most corporations have taken down DEI funding and or support from support staff, and we're actually going in the inverse direction with this incoming Trump administration. So I think the earlier you act on your gut feeling when you enter a space and you realize this space does not align with my identity, my dignity, my ideas, or my development, it's time to go. There's no point wasting your labor doing like 4 years, 5 years, even 3 months worth of work. Now, there's a difference between that and economic needs. Like if you need a job to pay the bills, there's no judgment. At the same time, you have to ask yourself, hey, this is a volunteer opportunity. This is an internship. This is a startup. This may be part-time, maybe full-time. Maybe I have the ability to move on. The faster you do that, the happier you will be. And then the more successful you'll actually be. Because if you think about all the labor you provided any org that you now feel disaffected by or don't vibe with, it now can be converted into new spaces that are deserving of your community. So the last point I'll mention is that after moving to LA County, and this could have been New York City, this could have been Chicago, this could have been Minneapolis, this could have been Austin, Texas, any of the major cities. I've enjoyed the fact that now that I'm in these spaces, there's actually a visualization to the direct impact you're doing. So it really doesn't matter what you do in advocacy work. I know all of us come from different angle and everyone's work is super valid. Just make sure you can see the impact sometimes time to time because it's those small wins that get through those huge losses. Example, the current election results, and then keep going. Because I ask elders all the time, like, how do you guys have the sanity to keep pushing through this? We're freaking out. But then I remind myself, we've been through this before, 2016. Now we just have to do it again and keep pushing.
Yeah, like as I reflect, yeah, that sort of persistence is something that's very key. So I remember when I was in high school specifically, I realized that the school district that I was in was not going to adequately represent for people in general, whether it meant that we wanted to be able to take breaks during class in order if we were having a panic attack or something along those lines. That's like an example of something that's highly discarded, especially in Texas education. How do you I had to learn how to go about finding the right resources. Luckily, the internet is really good on that sort of thing, finding forums and stuff to leverage my youth and stuff to just really gun in on amplifying that voice and representing that sense of maturity to really dive deep into what little things I could do to render an impact, even if it seemed like people were just giving me a youth stick in a way. So yeah, like I remember some when I really started taking action was when I really got aggravated with people patronizing me for being this was like when I was 14 or 15 or so, and I got really aggravated with being patronized as a result of number and seriously started going to the school board meetings and advocating for everything from mental health to arts, being that gadfly that's on the wall and wouldn't stop representing things, roping in friends and teachers that were cool with me to come to certain meetings to really amplify my territory, finding people who may have been older and who could represent my sort of thing. And what's crazy is that when I think about this, that same sense of strategy of finding these key people, being unafraid to have 1 to 3 page representation of what you want to do, how it could be done, for example, in a sample budget, etc. It felt like the same song and dance. The same thing that I had to do at the age of 14 and 15 has been the same thing that I had to do career wise when I was 24, 25, and everything in between. So I really believe in the power of consistency, communication, and collaboration in order to make this trilogy of creating a decent ecosystem that goes on. And that's my final thought and reflection, I guess.
I just want to say, kind of wrap up with like kind of say like align yourself with your values, like kind of identifying your values is key. I think like kind of like and not just like going after things. Cause I think like how we kind of been brought up by society like, oh, you chase after success, you chase after things, but then it's kind of realized that it's like kind of those it's like kind of rooted in the scarcity mindset of like navigating career or like navigating through work or finance whatnot. It's like it's at the same time it's what led you to like a lot of burnout and a lot of like health condition problems with it. And then like, the go hustle culture that we kind of live in. But at the same time it's like if we kind of like learn to like embrace who we are, like be our authentic self and like just to lean into that and just lean into like ourselves more, taking care of ourselves and like like and you can't like pour into an empty cup, right? So you have to pour into yourself first and so like taking care of ourselves and be self-compassionate with ourselves. And like of course like for us a lot of us who are disabled, going through mental health challenge or neurodivergence, living in a world that wasn't designed for us in mind. So like we had to have to like, understand that like being the outliers and working towards in the system that wasn't designed for us. So of course again it can be very traumatizing at first. So it's definitely can be like a lot of like taking time for ourselves and just really understanding ourselves and focus on like what makes us happy, what really identifying that for ourselves and like and then be able to kind of like before we get to actually advocate for others and take that into our work into yourself as well.
Yeah, just as I had imagined, this was a very inspiring chat, and it lived up to what I was hoping it would be. Thank you all for participating, your vulnerabilities, your sharing. I feel like these types of events definitely inspire me or give me more inspiration, but courage and motivation to continue doing this work. I know many of us have felt the isolation in these endeavors, and sometimes it can just be a big mental game. And yeah, we've talked a lot about self-care, our mental health journeys, and how, it would have been nice for some things for us to have known in hindsight, but at the same time, we are accepting that that was part of our particular journeys. And we are really hoping to be able to share this with younger generations, those who may even be considering later in life transitions in their careers, or maybe moving from corporate type work to passion driven work, or vice versa, or whatever that looks like, entrepreneurship. We had a whole other section we didn't get to go through because there was just so much to share. But we hope that you'll stay in touch and stay connected with us as we are hoping to put on some programming for next year as well, maybe at a minimum on a quarterly basis. And we have some community things coming up to stay connected throughout the year. And, maybe this could be another start to some community building together. I think there's a lot of synergy here and with the participants, and I'm sure with those of you who are tuning in. And I think I can speak for everyone that we're open to collaborating. We're open to hearing from you all if you're interested in sharing some more resources